Welcome to the Healer's Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healer's Café, and today I have with me Annette Presley, and she's a registered dietitian for over 28 years, certified functional nutritionist, author and creator of Mummy Maker Method. And after discovering that the diet advice that she'd learned as a dietitian was actually contributing to chronic disease, Annette changed course to learn about functional nutrition and nutrigenomics. There we go. We can almost do it in English. Anyway, so welcome. I would love to hear. Well, first of all, what started you in healthcare in general, in nutrition, and I'd love to know what you discovered.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me first. And I was 16 in high school, and we had aerobics for PE. And I just thought that was the greatest thing and wanted to be an aerobics instructor. So I started picking up Shape magazine at the grocery store. But it was the nutrition articles that really interested me. So when I went to college, I put nutrition down as my major, and nobody said I couldn't. And so I went with it. So I had no idea that I had never heard of a registered dietitian. But when I took my first nutrition class, I kind of found out about that. And I'm like, oh, great, I can do something in this field. So I just kind of went with it. And then about halfway through, I read a book called Know Your Fats by Mary Enig. So she was a biochemist, expert on fat chemistry, and she contradicted pretty much everything I had been taught about fat. And so I was kind of left like, what do I do with this? So normally we're kind of trained to automatically dismiss anybody like they're a quack or whatever if they disagree with the status quo. But I knew she was right about trans fats. And so I couldn't really dismiss her as a quack. And I figured if she was right about trans fats, I had to at least consider that she might be right about saturated fat. And so I spent about a year just poring over all the science on saturated fat and cholesterol, and discovered that we've never had any science to support our views on that saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease or any other malady. And I was so angry when I found out that I almost gave up nutrition entirely because I thought, what's the point? But I really felt like God wanted me to stay in and tell the truth. And so I totally changed course. And I actually had to defend my credentials for telling people to eat butter instead of margarine, if you can believe that. And it was I'm really glad I had that experience because it was eye-opening into the inside workings of our healthcare system. And so every letter they sent me had some quote from a nameless expert, and all the expert did was criticize me. And so they never addressed the science. They didn't care about that. I was criticized for asking my own questions instead of relying on the questions that had already been asked and answered. And I'm just sitting there like, this is science. We're supposed to ask questions. We're supposed to challenge answers. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. And we're not allowed to do that.
Wow. And that was how many years ago?
So that was back in 2008.
Yeah. Well, I think that trend has continued.
Yes, it definitely has. We're witnessing it right now.
Yeah, where's the science? Yeah, no debate, nothing. There's only one narrative.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's really how you know who's telling the truth. If you have to censor, the truth can handle questions. So the truth will never need to censor a lie, but a lie will always need to censor the truth.
Yeah, well put. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and I think too, what's really sad, and I think in margarine, for the use of margarine, it was sort of similar. Endless commercials that
Mhm.
never stop. And even when you hear that, okay, you know what, maybe butter isn't so bad after all, and maybe margarine is actually a big culprit here, you're seeing ads and ads,
Mhm.
healthy people, and we're pretty seduced by propaganda. I mean,
Yeah.
we think, okay, we'll just take the sound off, or we won't watch commercials, but it seeps through culturally.
Mhm.
It's an incredible phenomena. I mean, I've had people who know the science, but it's like, well, margin is part of how I was raised,
Right.
and it's like, wow, and it's like, well, where does the common sense go?
Right.
Another thing we've lost these days.
We've definitely lost common sense for sure.
So well, tell us, I mean, for those who might still be eating margarine, and what did you actually discover about trans fats and saturated fats? Maybe that would be really useful.
Yeah. So trans fats actually can cause diabetes, and heart disease and pretty much anything else. They also can they cause a lot of inflammation in the body, and the type of fat it is, our bodies just aren't used to that. We don't really have a way to process it, but it does get incorporated into our cells like saturated fat, but it doesn't act biologically like saturated fat. And so if you look at some of the interesting industries that have boomed, like anti-aging,
Yes.
so trans fats actually age you a lot faster, because they don't hold their shape like the saturated fats do. So you're going to get wrinkly. You're going to have issues with, you're going to have inflammation in your heart, all the other organs, blood sugar spikes, all kinds of problems with these trans fats. So they're not just, oh, I grew up that way kind of
Mhm.
a thing. They're actually very dangerous.
Right.
And in the US, the FDA has banned them. I mean, except that they always allow for companies that can't find a decent replacement. So,
Right.
you know,
Uh, yeah. So trans fats, where do you find them? I mean, where are the most common places, and the places that you have been surprised to find them, and that many people may not realize?
yeah, so they're in mostly processed food. So all your snack foods used to have them, potato chips, all of those kinds of things. There actually is trans fats in dairy, but it's the different kind. And so those trans fats are actually very healthy for you. But it's the man-made fats. Man just doesn't do it right. you know but but mostly the like margarines, of course, shortening. Crisco used to be hydrogenated cottonseed oil, and so that's kind of how that got started.
Mhm. And what about like the vegetable oils in general?
Yeah, so yeah, in general they're very inflammatory, and so I don't know if you've heard of the game Red Rover. It's it's where you have two teams. It's a child game, and each team locks arms with each other, and then one person from the other team runs across and tries to break through an arm, and then if they do, those people go to the other team, and so whichever team has all the people wins. It's kind of how it works.
Okay.
So if we think of that, saturated fat are like 300-pound football players. Polyunsaturated fats, which are the kind we find in the vegetable oils, are like 2-year-old toddlers. So if you have a football player running into a line of toddlers, what's going to happen? I mean, somebody's going to get hurt, right? It's not going to go well. So that's the way these polyunsaturated fats are. They damage very easily, and they have these double bonds on their structure, and they have more than one. And each double bond is kind of like a kick me sign. It's like an invitation to do damage to your body. And so that's why they're so bad. So saturated fats don't have any of these kick me signs. The monounsaturated fats have one kick me sign. And so they're still pretty stable.
So like olive oil
Yeah.
would be a better choice than sunflower oil.
Exactly. Right.
Canola oil. What about avocado oil?
Yeah. So avocado would be like the olive oil. So the ones you'd want to avoid would be canola, cottonseed, soy, corn, sunflower, safflower, and grapeseed.
And then I've heard different reports about coconut oil. What's your?
Yeah, so coconut oil is mostly saturated. So generally it's pretty good. I do think the animal fats are actually better for us, like properly rendered lard, beef tallow, butter, ghee, those types of fats are definitely the best because they also come packaged with fat soluble vitamins like A, D, and K2.
Right. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your experience as a dietitian and what you discovered, because as a naturopathic doctor, we often have patients that say, oh, well, I'm following my dietitian's advice, and it's like, okay, so I don't need any extra help, and
right,
it's like, okay, no problem, show me what you eat. And I've done that like enough times to be really alarmed at what I'm seeing. So I'm just, so what is your, well, first of all, what's the most shocking thing or several examples of it? And then why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I sometimes jokingly tell people that I have a license to kill. Because because literally the advice I'm supposed to give out actually causes chronic disease and inflammation. And so I think the most shocking thing for me was the fat, because I had heard most of my life that saturated fat is going to kill you, pretty much, and that you need to eat all these oils. And then, of course, I think one of the other things that was really shocking to me was cholesterol, because I had been taught, of course, that cholesterol in your body causes heart disease. And what I noticed is that the patients I had who had higher cholesterol levels, they lived longer. They did better in the hospital, and they usually got out of the hospital. Whereas the ones that had very low cholesterol often died. Or they just didn't do well, or they had to go to more long-term care. And so I was kind of noticing this in the hospital and thinking, I don't know, what I'm being told isn't quite matching what I'm seeing in my patients. And so I think probably the biggest thing really is our view of heart disease. I think we're way off base on that because cholesterol really doesn't have a whole lot to do with it.
There's been studies, 40 years ago from Japan
that
sort of like clarified the point.
And so actually when I was doing the research, what I found is a thread of iodine in every single different type of study. So whether it was epidemiological or double blind, placebo, whatever it was. And so the interesting thing is that the countries or the people that had a higher iodine intake, they had lower rates of heart disease, even if their cholesterol was a little bit higher than, the norm. And so that was, and even in animal studies, like dogs, cholesterol doesn't bother them, but if you take their thyroid out, it does. And so to me, it was like, we're missing this whole nutritional angle here. And so I went on to find out that most Americans, at least, are deficient in iodine, and probably a lot of people around the world are. And so what if that's the problem and not, the fat intake kind of thing? So that I think was just really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, no, I'm shocked at, the prescriptions of even like Lipitor to lower so-called cholesterol preventatively.
Well, yeah. And well, so I actually had like a 45-year-old in rehab. I worked in rehab and long-term care mostly. And she came in and her cholesterol levels were, she had all kinds of, I don't know, just all kinds of health issues that she shouldn't have had at that age. I mean, I was older and way better health than she was. Um, and so her cholesterol was under 100. She was on statins. And so I told the doctor, maybe we should take her off the statins because her cholesterol is really low and it might be causing all of her problems. I mean, she had depression. Um, I think she was falling a lot, and so she broke her leg and just all these things. And his response was, can cholesterol go too low?
Hi, I'm Dr. Manon Bolliger, and I wanted to take a moment to thank you for watching these podcasts. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Also, feel free to leave comments and like it. This way, more people get to find out about this work and about other choices for health. So I think it's really important that we all share this information. I have a free gift to you. It's a 7-sequence email that has tips for every day, and it's a little insight about how to live your life when it comes to health. And it's very much built on how I managed to overcome stage 4 cancer and what it took. So I would love you to have this, and thank you once again for listening to these podcasts.
And it was just I didn't know how to respond to that. I'm just like, yes. It can, because cholesterol, we need it, we would die without it, and so but that's kind of where we are with modern medicine. We don't pay attention to these things. So I'm pretty sure if they just took her off the statins and let her eat saturated fat and cholesterol, she would be fine.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
And even in my elderly patients, they get put on statins all the time, and they have issues falling, which is one of the side effects of statins. Blood sugar issue, they're diabetic, and statins cause that. So like everything they come into the hospital for could be a result of them being on a statin drug.
Yeah. And yet, iatrogenic deaths are only the third. I think after this so-called pandemic, I think it might be the first. I think that will be iatrogenic deaths. So when you look at the management of what's going on now. So let's switch to what's going on now, because it's really what's on everybody's mind.
Yeah.
So, and as a naturopathic physician here in BC, we're known. I've been in practice for 30 years. We've been known for prevention and looking after the body to make the body resilient, and and to take good care of it with whatever is needed food wise. And sometimes during more stressful periods, you up the antes a little bit, because your body is slightly more stressed, right? So you would consider things like increasing your vitamin D, especially if we don't get sun, or zinc, and vitamin C if you're not, having enough fresh, foods that are plentiful in it. So anyway, that was enough to get me a big slap on my wrist, because suddenly with this new virus, apparently,
nutrition doesn't work all of a sudden.
Suddenly we got to treat it differently, and maybe there's a point to it. It was man-made after all. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe there is a piece of truth. Maybe there's something we should pay attention to, but I still believe that the resilience of the body is what's going to get us through this, if there is a through way, especially now that there is so much research that is showing that the spike protein itself is a problem, and it's causing all kinds of unexpected And we'll go.
And then we're injecting that into people, which just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, just on the common sense thing, but I think that went out a long time ago. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to go there. But and it's fair enough. It is a trial. We're phase 3, whatever. You could say, oh well, the animals died, but hey, we're different. Let's do this one differently as well, right? And let's just try it on humans, and mass amounts of data. And so a lot of people are now kind of going, well, they've either lost somebody. I think it was one of our television stations, actually here in Canada, I think it was CBC or CTV. Gosh, I don't want to say it because I'm not sure which one it was, but they were trying to wrap up the narrative and wanting people to share their losses, and there have been losses. There's losses every year for all kinds of viruses and stuff. So I mean, we get sick. That's if your system's not strong, things happen. But they were hoping to get lots of stories about the deaths through the the word we really can't say out loud. And instead they had to shut it down. There were over like hundreds of thousands of people writing about the injuries and deaths and all kinds of horrific things that have happened after the injections. And so I guess my question to you is, and people, again, I'm for you choose, it's your body, you choose, and you got to live with it one way or another. But I can't help but feel that no matter what choice, because this was not informed consent,
right,
under any circumstances, the doctors didn't even, there was nothing to read about it.
right.
The ingredients just didn't show up until just a few weeks ago, basically, maybe a month ago.
Yeah, and I don't even think we have all of those listed.
So. Exactly. All these independent labs are finding more and more interesting things in them. But the thing is, and you could get like super depressed, and especially the people who got coerced or felt they had to for their job, for this, for that, even though that's illegal, that's another issue. But what have you seen, or have you got experience how to help those people who who may not have, they may be a bit more fatigued, but they are maybe just in fear that something could happen because so much has happened.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to stay hopeful. I know the times right now are insane, and a lot of us sane people are looking on like, how on earth did we even get here? But I do know, especially in the United States, if we can beat this in the United States, then the world will change. They'll follow. So just so you all know, we here in the US are working very hard to make sure that we get our freedoms back. So, so if we can do that, and I believe that we can, because I think a lot of people are actually starting to wake up, and that's a good thing. And so I really believe that we're going to head to a time when things get a little better than they were before. So we're not going to go back to normal. We are going to have a better normal, I believe, because people are going to be more awake, and we're going to be pursuing more of these natural therapies. And so the first thing I would say is, don't be afraid, even if you had to get the vaccine for your job. Fear is one thing I think that makes it worse. So, don't be afraid. And I have to believe that there is always a cure for evil. So that's my, I don't know, guiding principle, that nothing evil can stand against us. And so even with the vaccine, if you've had to get it, things like alpha lipoic acid, N-acetylcysteine. I know in the US we're trying to get rid of that. But those are two things that I find extremely helpful, especially for long hauler syndrome and those types of things.
Can you break that down a little bit, why they're helpful? Because you can go onto all these websites, and there's so many suggestion.
Mhm.
It's like you end up with a bucket list of things.
I think, yeah.
And so like obviously these are the top ones you believe are helpful. And can you say why? So maybe start again with the first one. And
Yeah, so alpha lipoic acid, so both actually N-acetylcysteine or NAC and alpha lipoic acid boost glutathione, which is the master antioxidant in the body. And so really if our glutathione levels and our vitamin D levels are really good, it's incredibly difficult to get sick in the first place. Um, and so both of them actually are really great for lung health. So, this virus affects the lungs and as the spike protein does as well. Um, and so I mean, personally, I've had asthma. It was in remission until last November or October. I think because I had to wear a mask at work. And um, so I started taking high doses of alpha lipoic acid and N-acetylcysteine, and now it's gone again. So it's N equals 1, but it really works incredibly well with the breathing,
Mhm.
and that seems to be one of the main problems with this. But really, if glutathione is high, then your detox pathways will be functioning much better, and you'll be able to get rid of all the bad stuff that might be in the vaccine. And so that's why I recommend those two specifically.
And what about, I mean, I've heard that they thought, I feel like it's hearsay, but I mean, it was stated so obviously, and by many of the repetitive narrators of the same puppet show, but they're saying, oh, we thought it was going to just stay in the deltoid,
Yeah.
right? And then lo and behold, it spread everywhere to the heart, to the ovaries, to the blood vessels, and same kind of, and then the cadavers that they were able to dissect in Japan, they could verify that this did not stay in the deltoid,
Yeah.
So what about the part that I have not found an answer personally to is how do you stop the generation of the spike protein? Because basically it's as if we have, through the lipid protein layer, it's gone right into the cell.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's protected, it's in our cells to repeat production when needed. So how do you see this? Like, do you always then have to be in hyper protected state to not, the word in French is déclencher, to trigger this more production of it? Like, when would it ever stop? I mean, they've admitted they don't know when it would stop.
Right.
But
Yeah.
how do you see
Yeah.
stopping that? Or what's the angle that you might have on this?
Yeah. So I really think nutrition is important. And so again, making sure your vitamin D is good, and the glutathione. I think those two are like the foundation. But then on top of that, I actually wonder if iodine deficiency would play a role in this as well. Because every cell in the body has an iodine receptor.
Right. Yeah.
And we have a lot of toxins that block that, the iodine from those receptors. But I wonder if we could get the iodine in, if that would strengthen the cells, so that we would be able to resist, I guess, better, being the spike protein manufacturer that they've now wanting us to become. But I really wonder about that. And so, we have this chronic iodine deficiency. I'm pretty sure it's worldwide. In the US, it's probably about 90% of people are iodine deficient. And so when you add that in there, I would also look at like 5G. So, are you exposing yourself to that? Because I kind of wonder if that isn't a trigger, and maybe not getting the 5G, keeping your phone off your body, that kind of thing. I'm thinking, what we really need to do when we're in groups is not wear masks. We need to turn off our phones and Wi-Fi, so that we don't have that huge amount of 5G. in the group, kind of a thing. So those are kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't know the 5G. I was told that there's a big misunderstanding about 5G, because we see all these 5G cells going up everywhere, which again, they were put during the lockdowns. They were, and anything done secretly without consent, without vote, I don't know, I just suspect naturally.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I actually don't know if it's the same thing as the 5G from our phone. What actually comes out. I mean, I know there's studies showing, increase in young children's, brain tumors and all this, because the skull is, thinner and all that. But I have not yet fully studied this, so I'm careful. I don't just,
right.
Let's be careful, don't sleep with it in your room,
Yeah, exactly.
a break. Yeah, and I don't know the level of it that it contributes. I mean, there's certainly lots of people say that it does. So I don't personally know.
Yeah, well, and I don't think any of us do, because we really haven't studied it.
Exactly.
But what I find very interesting is that 5G was implemented in Wuhan right before this started.
Yeah.
If you go back in history, there's always some new technology before some major disease. And so I don't think we can rule out technology. I think we need to study it. I mean, I think that's what this is telling us, is we need to study this and make sure that we're not heading towards, a complete depopulation with our technology.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And that goes back to science and real science, and discussions and non-censorship, and all of the missing ingredients that we have right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're actually past our time, but alpha lipoic acid, NAC, iodine,
and vitamin D.
Vitamin D, and watch your phones.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Annette, for coming on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.